Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our She-Cession panel discussion with these amazing women. I am so looking forward to listen to all of you. Stewart Hamilton will be our host. Stewart, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here and hosting our event.
I am thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be able to be part of this exciting time. I know that this particular moment in history has been really difficult for all of us. And I think as we are standing in a moment where we don't know how to move forward, that sometimes that limits us. And today, the Center for the Women of New York has gathered together some women who are going to help us through that, help us push through those boundaries, help us not only to look at our current jobs or to help us to move forward in finding new career positions, but to also empower us in what we are able to hold back for information, share for information, and ways that we can continue to look forward to our careers. I know it's been a tough time to think about looking forward, but things are getting better, and I think that's exactly what we need to do. And we have an amazing group of women who are going to help us do just that. Now, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. The first to be is Lisa. Lisa, can you go ahead and tell us exactly what it is that you're bringing to our panel today?
Thank you, Stewart. As Stewart said, my name is Lisa Boily, and I'm an economist with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the jobs as they are and as they're projected to grow over the next 10 years and how you can best position yourself to get a good job. So with that, Cecilia, if you could call up the first slide so that I can show to you all what does the economy look like in terms of jobs?
No problem, Lisa.
Okay. So when that comes up is the top 10 jobs in the economy. And to the right of the slide, you're going to see what proportion of each of those occupational categories is held by women or were held by women in 2020. So take a look. Office administrative and administrative support occupations, they're the largest occupational group in the economy and largely held by women. This is how things are. This isn't to say that these are the jobs you should be looking for. In fact, these are fairly low-paying jobs and jobs that aren't projected to grow. So it's not the thing to look for, but just look at how things are now. Look at the bottom of the list, you see healthcare support occupations, 85.3% of those jobs are held by women. Those are largely low-paying jobs. So this is areas we'd like to leave. We'd like to move to the center here, move into jobs that are higher paying. But you may see right now, there's a lot of openings. The openings may be in jobs that you don't want to be in for a long term, but for short term, they keep the income flowing. So keep that in mind too. Think of the short term, just to get some money in, and think of your plan, your long-term plan. So let's go to the second slide. And this shows you the jobs that are projected to grow the fastest. And healthcare and personal care and service occupations lead the list. This is because of an aging population and the need to support them. But again, these jobs are largely low paying. This might be a short-term objective to do this, to have money coming in. Sometimes there's flexibility associated with these jobs. If you have childcare responsibilities in the day, you might be able to do it at night. But think about long-term, moving to occupations that may not be held in large percentages by women, but tend to be paid more. So think about that. And so that's what shows you, that's what this slide shows you. And I think at this point, hopefully this lays a groundwork for the rest of the discussion. And we'll move on to our next panelist for them to discuss what they have to say.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful. If we could hear from Belinda, I know she has some interesting information for us as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belinda Simmons, and I'm an associate human rights specialist with the New York City Commission on Human Rights. I work out of our Bronx office. We have an office in every borough. And when I started with the commission, I started as an intake officer where I would take complaints from the public of discrimination. And after doing that for a while, I moved on to investigations for 19 years. And now I work in our Community Relations Bureau, where we go out and we train the public regarding their rights. We train people as young as middle school through senior citizens. So, there's a lot to learn, about our rights in New York. What Lisa was talking about before, as we see that there's, when it comes to employment, women are now taking more and more jobs in the employment sector. And a lot of times they're taking jobs that were considered mostly male dominated. So in that case, we would just like women to know that you have rights. You have rights in every setting of the workplace, whether it's female or male dominant. And what I will do is to tell you what, some of those rights are. And I will tell you what you can do if you feel you've been treated differently on the job because of your gender. But right now, I would just like to go on to our next presenter, which is Katy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katy Fernandez. I am a director of original content development and integration at ESPN, focused on ESPN films and 30 for 30, as well as ESPN Plus original series and special projects. I'm here really representing the media and entertainment silo. I've spent some time working in the NFL Network as a producer, as well as Hulu before they had all the fancy shows. And once they were brought into the Disney family, I joined the ESPN Plus team. I'm also a manager of people. And as a young woman in a managerial position, I'm always happy to speak about what we look for, how I approach hiring practices, and as well as how I've navigated through my mobility journey since that's certainly had its up and downs, but I feel very grateful to be where I am, considering the statistics that Lisa presented us in terms of management. So thank you, Lisa, for that. And Belinda, I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're excited to have all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. One quick area of business before we start our full discussion. That is that the Center for the Women of New York is a nonprofit organization. Because of that, we have different reporting things we need to do during the year. So everyone, if you would, just give us no personal information except your zip code. That allows us to know what area we have people joining us from. So if you would just give us your zip code, I believe it's in the chat right now where you can do that. We'd really appreciate it. Also, as this discussion goes on, thank you very much. As this discussion goes on, we would really like to hear from you. If you have a question that pops up, please add it to the chat. Cecilia, as our president, is going to be looking at those, and she'll be able to share them with us as they go along if she feels that they pertain to the conversation. If not, this will also be available later, and I know there's going to be a discussion area at the end, so we'll be getting to that. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're coming in a little bit late, you are going to be in for a really interesting discussion today. Now, one thing all three of you were able to touch on, and I'd really like to start with, is the fact that a lot of us are entering the workforce at what's called an entry level, at a quick job that's getting healthcare, getting us, a salary, but then we want to move up. So let's talk about how you do that into a position that has been traditionally male dominated, that people don't traditionally look at a woman and say, she's the right one for the job.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess I'll start off with the interview process. Well, firstly, everybody do your homework, before you apply for a position. Okay, once you do your homework and you feel that you're qualified for the position, what you do is you go into the interview and be yourself. And being yourself means that, look, if you wear your hair naturally, for example, you go in with a natural, meaning an afro. Or if you wear locks, if that's how you usually wear your hair, you go in and you do that. Because you are protected under the law based on, your natural hair. As long as you come in and you look nice and, and neat. Secondly, don't undervalue yourself. Okay. Now, an employer cannot ask you what your current or previous salary is. So that shows that you have to go in knowing what type of salary that you're looking for. So you sit there, especially if you feel that you're in a male-dominated field, you go and say that this is a salary that I'm looking for. If the interviewer tries to engage you in some familial conversation, such as, oh, tell me about your family life. What do you do, on your days off? The interviewer may be searching to find out things about you, such as whether you're married or if you have children. Those questions are illegal under the human rights law. So what you need to do is just stick to the qualifications of the job. Another thing, we have a lot of mothers either entering the job force or already on the job force. And what the New York City Commission on Human Rights law states that the employer has to provide a lactation room for you to express milk on the job. So once you get the job, this is the type of conversation you have with the employer. The employer is supposed to show you a policy that the organization has that provides a sanitary room for a woman to express milk on the job that has to be clean and sanitary, cannot be a restroom, it has to have an electrical outlet and a table. And the employer has to provide time for the woman to express milk on the job. Another thing that women should also be conscious of, make sure you're respected on the job. Don't let anybody call you out of your name, such as honey or sweetie. No, you're Miss or Ms. So-and-so. Make sure you're respected in that way. You are not to be harassed on the job. If you feel you're harassed in any way regarding your gender, such as sexual harassment, you have to let your employer and supervisor know that this is not acceptable on the job. And don't be afraid that once you're on the job to learn new things. So when you take on a job, don't be afraid to learn things that might be out of your job title, so that when that promotion comes up, then you will have the skills to apply for that job, especially if it's a job that you're interested in that is traditionally male dominated. Now, if you feel in any of these situations that you're being treated differently on a job, meaning that you have asked for an accommodation, to express milk, or you've been harassed on the job, or you're being paid differently on the job because of your gender, we just want to let you know there's a place for you to go. So as long as you have that ace in your pocket, you should be okay. And that is the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And just to let you know, as long as you work in the city of New York, you have the right to file a complaint against your employer, no matter how many employees work for the job. So with that, if you go in with that confidence, knowing who you are and what you want, you should be okay.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Stewart lost internet, so she's not here for the moment. We're hoping to come back. But Belinda, I was wondering if during COVID, the amount of reports against employers increased in any way, and how, and did the complaints change nature?
Okay. Yes, during COVID, we've had an increase of complaints against Asians. Okay, because people, for some reason, associate COVID with Asian Americans. So a lot of Asians have been discriminated against, and we've seen it on the news where they've been beat up, called different names. So we've had a lot of complaints regarding COVID and Asian Americans. We also, with people regarding the vaccinations, as you know, that is something new that we're working with, where people who are asking for accommodations for not getting the vaccination due to their religion or due to any, other, for any other reasons they have. We're working on those cases now. So we're getting an increase in them now. So we just have to see how they pan out.
I'd like to comment on something Belinda said. She said, do your research. That's really important. Mm-hmm. And this is in terms of job requirements. Mm-hmm. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics has a handbook that goes through occupations and what the requirements are. Mm-hmm. So that's a place to go and look for that. And that's the Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can type OOH into Google and find out what their requirements are. So to be prepared for your interview. Another thing is she touched on knowing the salary to ask for. So it's another thing the Bureau of Labor Statistics has for you for about 800 jobs. What's the going rate in the metropolitan area or wherever you're looking for around the country? Because this isn't just New York based. If you're thinking of moving, you want to work in California or something like that, you can look up wage rates for other areas of the country. So remember to use this free data as part of your research. It's available on the internet, and I will give you the links to that at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Belinda. And Belinda, if you don't mind putting also in the chat the website or the contact information for the Human Rights Commission. I know you guys are always helping people, so it will be very useful for our audience.
Okay, and just to let your audience know, we do go out to different community-based organizations to do presentations, and we also have presentations at the commission. Right now, we're doing them virtually. So if you want to attend any of our workshops to find out about your rights regarding the human rights law, I'm going to put our website in the chat, and I'm also going to put my number where you can contact me directly.
Thank you so much. And now I think a very good real life example of overcoming so many of the challenges. It's Katy Fernandez here, our panelist. She has gone through many of those challenges and so gracefully. So Kati, would you like to share some of that?
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you to Lisa and Belinda for all those incredible gems. I've been taking notes myself while being on part of the webinar here. I would say, having intentionality and purpose around your search and your own brand has been one of the things that's helped me the most, right? Like for me, I'll touch a little bit on purpose. Like I understand where my passions and my desires are. And I think tapping into your mobility journey and how you navigate through the workspace is understanding what do you feel that purpose is and how do you think your superpower and skills translate into the job where you want to be, right? So understanding how to identify those, understanding your strengths, understanding how those transfer over to any job or any career field that you'd want, right? There's very little things I was doing as a server for 10 years. I started working as a back boy, which is such a bad term for that. As a busboy, when I was, 14 years old, and I continued working as a hostess and then a bartender and a server all throughout my college career. Those same exact skills are the skills I apply every single day while at Disney as a leader, as a manager, as a director of strategy. It's efficiency, it's operational, all those same things applied in those roles and those skills transferred over. And it was a matter of understanding how I identify those and understanding my purpose and my goals and my initiative based on that drive. So I definitely would say understanding your purpose is one. Intentionality is how Belinda talks about how you show up, understanding your authentic brand voice and how you navigate that through the workspace. I think it's definitely helped me. When I first came, one of the small and silent barriers, I think, in women's careers is not feeling like you can show up as yourself. And understanding your protector rights, which Belinda talked about, and understanding the career opportunities, like Lisa mentioned, is so influential towards that. And what I'll say is, I definitely felt more free to ideate when I didn't have to spend an hour straightening my hair. I actually never straighten my hair. This week is like one of the very odd weeks in the year where I'll actually do it. I normally wear it in braids, but I grew up thinking that wasn't professional. I wear it curly, and I grew up thinking that wasn't the case. And that was a huge pressure point for me when I went from living in LA to living in New York City and made that jump. So on top of the pressures of the job, there were pressures of how I was showing up. Cecilia, I would be curious, just as someone who's been so inspired by a lot of what Lisa and Belinda have been saying, is once you're in the career, how do you navigate to what's next, or properly advocating for yourself, whether it's I'm overdue for a promotion or I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And those are feelings that all of us, I think, experience, especially if we're showing up the way that our hearts and our minds want us to. So would you mind just like touching on that as well? I'm just curious. Like I said, sorry, Cecilia, I hope it's okay. I've been taking notes and really inspired by them. So just would love to hear more.
Okay. Like I had said earlier, when you get on a new job and you feel, or you've already been on a job for a while, and you looking into a promotional position. Like I said, well, you might, work with someone in that position who's, willing to teach you a couple of things. Now everybody's not always willing to teach people, but, you look at certain things. And if you have to get, let's say, an additional degree, or you have to take some, upgrade your skills, those are the things that you do. So when that promotion comes up, you will meet all the criteria for that promotion. So when you apply for it, especially if it's in a male-dominated field, if you find that you're the only female applying for the job and you don't get the job, you have to make sure that the person who got the job is not less qualified than you are for the job. Okay. And sometimes, that's kind of hard, but, you can tell when you're on the job. If you know that you're on that job, prepping yourself for, let's say, 2 years for the job, and here there's a new person that came onto the job, and they get that promotion after only being on for like 6 months, you might become suspicious of that. Okay. You may not know what this person was doing prior to coming onto that job, but what that person was doing while they were there. So because you were there, you might be in a better position to move up because you've been in the company and you know the company as a new person coming in. So these are little things, you have to keep in mind and do. You got to do your homework, and you also got to be very aware of your environment and what's going on. And I think it's a women's tuition. We have that sense. We're always tuning in to what's going on around us. So that's what you use. So if you feel you were denied a promotion because of your gender, this is the evidence that you bring to us. Look, I applied for this position. I believe I'm qualified for it. The person who got it, I believe, is not qualified, and here's the reason why. And then we will do our job, and we will look into it to see whether or not that position was given to the person only because of their gender. So I don't know if that helps you a little, Kati. Yeah,
No, I love that. That's a great response. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa.
And I'm sorry not to cut you off. Another thing I wanted to add about the interview, if somebody asks you a question that, well, don't you have family at home? How could you do overtime? How you reply to those questions, you would say, what does that have to do with me doing the job? Let's just stick to the job requirements. Okay, so that's how you handle, those type of questions. Just always bring the interviewer back to what does that have to do with the job? Okay.
Belinda,
I'm sorry about that, Kati.
You mentioned, how to put your ideas about your rights forward. So,
right.
You mentioned a lactation room if you're a nursing mother.
Right.
How do you negotiate that within the context of a probationary period where you could be let go for any reason, not for reasons like that, but how would you recommend that new employees within the probationary period navigate those sorts of things?
Okay. Now, under the human rights law, employers are supposed to have a lactation policy in their handbook. So coming in, you should know what your rights are regarding pregnancy and lactation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's nothing that you have to negotiate. So coming in, when you read the handbook or you ask for the handbook and you read it and you find there is no lactation policy, then you can ask. Say, listen, I'm a new mom. I need to express milk. What is the company's policy regarding lactation?
Mm-hmm.
So, but is that something we should do in the initial interview? Because that is also revealing that we're a new parent. Maybe that's something that would then be inadvertently held against us.
Okay, now, if you mention it in the interview, you might lose the job. Okay, but it won't be right because you can say the reason why I believe I didn't get the job is because I asked this question. What I would do is wait till I am offered the job and I take the job. Then you can ask those questions, because if they get rid of you right after you ask that question, then that's blatant discrimination because they had already offered you the job. Okay. And what you're asking for is something that you're entitled to.
Yeah, it's a reasonable accommodation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Lisa?
It did, but I just think the probationary period can be tricky. So, if they fire you right after you ask the question, you have a good case. If they fire you 6 months later because you asked the question and they think you're trouble, then you don't have a case, or your case is more difficult to prove.
It's more difficult, but I think employers are more savvy now about our law.
Mm-hmm.
If they have attorneys,
mm-hmm.
because the lawyers know. And
mm-hmm.
if you can say, even though you can be fired for no reason during a probationary period, as
mm-hmm.
long as it's not discriminatory, as long as you can show I was doing everything okay until I asked that lactation question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only reason that I could see that they terminated me. Now, you may be right or you may be wrong, but you're never going to know unless you file a complaint. Yeah. And if you file a complaint and they retaliate against you for filing a complaint, that's also against our law too.
I wonder if it really depends on the field, and like we're all like obviously for it, and like you being yourself, it's what's going to work. But there's a huge culture that has to change at a country level, but also like in different fields. It may be like Lisa, you're saying like many of the jobs that will need people, and like unfortunately our workforce one. Panelist couldn't make it, but I would be curious to know how it is for fields where like men have dominated for a very long time. To go to an interview for one of those jobs would be very different than going to an interview with Kati, for example. Like that, I know Kati, you are hiring, so you may have something to say here. I'm sure that you would be an amazing person to interview with, but not everyone's like you.
Well, I will say like we have tremendously good practices in place for issues like that. Every single mom that is either on the way gets a plan that works for them and flexibility. There's almost like a no ask rule for us. Like you share what you feel comfortable with. There's offices if you're going into a building or a shoot, and you're on the ground doing more of those things, it's a requirement for us to have opportunities there and requirements that we meet, especially if we're alerted well in advance. And if not, we'll make sure that there's a safe space for people there. I think that me being a woman and a hiring manager, although I am not a parent, I understand how important it is to remain flexible, especially with COVID-19. Part of the She-Cession and the rates that are driving that is the fact that women are wearing multiple roles at home. You're like taking care of your kids, setting them up for school while also filling in for your direct reports, while doing your job, while like, making sure your house is not on fire and that no one is getting sick and dying, right, at the same time. So I think that employers need to remain flexible, and that's definitely of priority for us, especially for me as a hiring manager, to make sure that, like, if something is working for you for the past 2 years, I know that we all want to like go back into the offices at some point and be there and continue to collaborate because we understand how important that is for creativity, maintaining flexibility for parents that are weaning their kids off from seeing them every single day, or like pickups that you now have to go back and reschedule, things like that. So it's certainly top of mind for myself, for my leadership, and for our team at the company, which I'm thankful for. And if it wasn't y'all, I would be advocating for it. Don't you worry.
And that's great. And we do need those advocates as we move forward. This question was originally written for Lisa, but I think that all three of you, I'd really like to hear your different perspectives on it. And that question was, in this current market where careers are constantly changing, we're always pivoting, what do you think are key skills for women to have so they can do that pivot as they need? What should they be looking forward to that even though you're enjoying your current job, we're always supposed to be thinking toward our next job?
Okay, I guess I could start since the question was for me. And I actually, while I'm talking about this, if Cecilia, if you could put up the third slide. What I suggest, the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out 10-year projections every year. So for the long term, go to the handbook, the Occupational Outlook Handbook. How to get there is the website is right. The link is right on the bottom, www.bls.gov/OOH. For other career planning, it's interesting articles, resume writing, how to do an interview. You'll find that sort of information on the second guide, the Career Outlook, that's constantly being updated. And the link there is listed out, www.bls.gov Career Outlook. So for the short term, you go to your usual contacts, you look at the help wanted signs. You might not be in a job that you want or the one that you want to stay in long term. For the long term, look at the handbook. Look at the requirements. Look at what the job pays. Look at the educational background you need to get into it. Look into what is that education going to cost you? And are you going to be able to pay off the loans that you get with the salary you're likely to get in that job? And keep looking, because things are constantly changing and this handbook is constantly being updated. So what I would say is go to the resources and do your research. All of these are free. They're there to help you with particularly from the Occupational Outlook Handbook, with the long-term planning of your career. So that's the place, a place to go. There are other places, but certainly go to the Occupational Outlook Handbook. Thanks.
I think, Lisa, you mentioned something that I think is super important, and it was understanding your debt to potential earning potential. And I think that's something that, like, a lot of people, especially as education continues to rise, which is completely super important. And as younger women in their careers, right, what might be your collegiate career, are looking at understanding what's with intention, like what that salary can be. Because I know for me, I come from a single parent, I had to kind of risk, going to get a master's and had an undergraduate school that paid for everything. But I knew that my earning potential didn't have a ceiling. And there are jobs that do, unfortunately. So I was really glad that you brought that up.
There are jobs that cost a lot of money, or say, for example, lawyers cost a lot of money to become one. And there's more lawyers than there are jobs. You should know that. That's in the handbook. It's been in there for a long time. It doesn't mean that people don't get the jobs. And if it's your dream, then no one's going to tell you not to follow your dream, but realize that you may end up with a lot of debt at the end of your training, and you may not end up in the job that you want. And there's a potential for high earnings there, but there's also potential for having difficulty finding a slot. So you should know that, when you make these decisions, you should know those things. And to the degree that we're able to share that with you, we put it in the handbook. So go there and look. You just make the decisions knowing those things. If it's your dream, go for it. But know what's on the ground, what you can expect, and maybe even have a backup plan. So even in the handbook, they'll say related occupations. If you like this, maybe you'll like that. If you have these skills, they might be able to apply here. So have a backup plan. Now that's another way to approach things, especially like people with creative careers. Now they usually have a backup plan. They have a plan to have money coming in. Okay, so you could look for a job that you could still do the career, but have money coming in the breaks and when you get your gigs. Nobody's going to stop creative people from doing their thing. They have a calling, they have to do it, but have a backup plan and use our guides for that.
I think that's phenomenal. I actually didn't even know that those guides were available, and being able to know what the numbers are. I mean, knowledge is power, and knowing what those numbers are as we move forward in our careers and being able to use that is really, really key. So thank you so much for speaking about that. I would like actually to ask Belinda a question right now. And that question for you is, what do you feel is a key element from your work that women need to know as they're re-entering the workplace?
Okay. I think the key element is they have a place to go to if they feel they're being discriminated or treated differently on the job.
Okay.
Before, women didn't have a place to go to.
Right.
Now we have a place to go to, and you have a lot of rights in the job. And there was one that I didn't even talk about, which is when it comes to reproductive decisions. If your employer decides that they don't want to give you benefits because you want to have an abortion, that's against the law. So there's a lot that women need to know. And we are there to provide them with information. There's a lot of resources out there, and we're definitely one of them.
I love it. Now, we've been talking a lot about when we're at our interview and all those kinds of things. And I'd like to pivot slightly and specifically speak to Kati for a minute, because you said you've hired people before. What is it beyond, okay, our resumes are what our resumes are, and we can make them look as good as possible. What is it, though, in our cover letter that would intrigue you enough to bring someone in? Because I find cover letters personally really intimidating. I'm trying to figure out what it is someone wants to hear from me, right? So what is it in a cover letter that makes you say, gee, I want to get that person in the door? Because now we have information for what happens after we're in the door, but let's get us in the door.
That's a great question. So I actually use LinkedIn profiles. That tells me more about you than your cover letter. And if something intrigues me that stands out, whether it's your college, whether it's diverse thinking that I pick up through the resume, or like intentionality, or how you've kind of harnessed your career, or an unexpected person who maybe hasn't gotten chances, I'll always flag and talk to them first on the phone. I like to think, and I encourage other business leaders across our organization as well. Like, I was music pre-med. I have no business doing my job. This is a cognitive role. This is not a technical role. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a product designer. I'm not a lawyer. Like, everything else is soft skills and intentionality, right? So for me, I'll never pass up on someone who hasn't had a career trajectory. I want to go look where those people are, right? Like the person that's getting passed over, the person that's not getting a chance, the person who stayed in contact with me, whose LinkedIn messaged me persistently for months on end, who has shown me that they wanted, but just keep getting looked over. Like, that person has heart and grit, and those things cannot be taught no manager can teach you that.
Right.
I can teach you whatever you need to learn on the job once you get there. The thing, unless I'm looking for a very particular skill, And even then, I'll still put the person through the process and flag as a candidate that we should have our eyes on.
I love that. It's hard to know what your soft skills are, but like you're speaking of, that can actually be key in getting something else. I mean, I think that so many people should say, I'm a quick learner. You want to teach me something, I'm going to be there to learn it for you. So it's good to know from a hiring manager perspective that that's actually something that other people would value as well.
Yeah.
So that's
Stewart, not to cut you off, but like Belinda talks a lot about like moms and like how we protect them. I'm like, I wish I had a mom working for me. They get things done, y'all. They wear multiple hats. They balance multiple projects. They are the best project managers I've ever met. They just don't have that on their resume, right? Like they know how to juggle through multiple things. They know personality management. Are you in a blue zone? Are you in a yellow zone? Are you just feeling like blue? They know how to interpret tiny humans that they can't speak. So therefore, I know that they can utilize those skills in an executive realm.
Yeah.
It's the same skills, you know?
It is true. And if you're dealing with tiny humans and their temper tantrums, generally you can head off the adult temper tantrums a bit faster.
Yeah. If you have a 2-year-old and you've been dragged through the trenches, you can handle any executive, any decision maker, any direct report who's not doing well. Like, moms, I'm looking for you. I am hiring.
I love it. I love it. That's great. So I just we have a few more minutes and then we're actually going to be opening up to questions. So I just wanted to touch again for all three of you. Again, thank you so much for your words and for sharing. And I think this has been inspiring. I do want to mention, and Cecilia's going to put the link up in the chat in just a moment, that we're actually having a fabulous seminar coming up in just a couple of weeks about LinkedIn and its value for everybody. And I think all hiring managers are checking your LinkedIn. So making sure that those are looking good and up to date and everything is really, really key. And we can teach you how to do that. So make sure you come back and join us in just a couple of weeks for that amazing seminar that's coming up. I know I will be taking many, many notes myself. So let's do that. But before we head over to the questions, I just want to make sure that each of you just take a moment, if you would, and give us again just that elevator pitch of inspiration for moving forward right now in a difficult career time, in a difficult time socially and emotionally for all of us.
Okay, I'll start. Well, first, I like women to know, don't be afraid. We have a lot of power, in and out of the home. So, you go out there, you do your research, you put your best foot forward. And as long as you do that, you'll be okay. And if for some reason something happens, just to know you have some place to fall back on. Okay? So we've got your back as far as discrimination. Women need to get together and, know that they're powerful. Look, we have a female vice president now, so we are making headway in the workplace now. Mm-hmm.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
And she's fabulous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kati, do you have anything you wanted to add for a moment?
No, I will just say that don't be discouraged. I know that there's been tremendous hardship in this year, whatever that may look like for you. And there's certainly a light at the end of the tunnel. And obviously an organization here at CWNY that wants to help and is here to create a safe space for you. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to speak for Belinda or Lisa, but I will say that, I'm sure that if anyone ever reaches out to us, I'm always committed to speaking to anyone that comes from the CWNY staff or that is flagged to me as someone to look out for, connect, and a connection costs me nothing. So I'm always happy to provide and lend and mentor and sponsor women because I truly feel that's how the world is run. I mean, Beyonce really nailed it with that song, y'all. And I feel that at my core, we are exceptional and we just have to understand how to continue to tap into our superpowers.
Yeah. And I think that's one of our great strengths as women is taking our group with us. we take our tribe with us. And I think that that's something that we can also tap into. And I know many of us are doing. So thank you so much for doing that. Wonderful. So if there's nothing else that anyone would like to add, Cecilia, I think we have a couple of questions in the chat. Let's open it up and find out what people are talking about.
Thank you, Stewart. Thank you all so much. I'm like putting things in the chat, but I'm also like making my own notes. Thank you. Thank you. I did put in the chat the LinkedIn, like it will be on career mobility, LinkedIn tips. And after that, I just don't want to forget, we will have soft skills workshops every first Thursday of the month. Am I still with you, Sor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. My computer completely shut down. I have a black screen now. But so that will be October 14th at noon. And then after that, every first Thursday of each month, we will have resume writing, we'll have interview tips. So stay tuned. The Human Rights Commission will also do a couple of workshops. Belinda, feel free to share the titles of your workshops since we have you.
Okay, it's going to be called, I believe it's Women in the Workplace. And we're going to go over the human rights law and how it affects women. So we're going to talk about race discrimination, which includes natural hair. We're going to talk about pregnancy, which includes lactation. We're going to talk about salary history. We're going to talk about credit history. We're going to talk about caregivers. These are the areas that a lot of women are concerned about in the workplace. So we will tell you, how to navigate those categories of discrimination during the interview and what to do if you feel you're being discriminated against on a job based on one of those categories.
What is your salary range rather than giving away what the perhaps employer would be willing to accept? So questions around how to navigate through that and get a sense without disclosing your own salary.
There's a new question here. How can one work around age discrimination with a JD degree? Belinda, maybe that's something that you could address. Age discrimination issues. Okay. To have a JD degree, you could basically, it could run the gamut of how old you could be to get a JD degree. You could, after high school, go straight to college, go straight to get a JD, or you could work in the field for many, many years and then get a JD degree. I don't know whether the JD degree really discloses your age. So the only thing I could say is that, just put your experience, on your resume. You go to the interview. If you believe you were denied the position because of your age, because you see other people going for the same position with JDs and they're younger than you because you're older or vice versa, that's the only evidence you could bring to us to allege age discrimination. It's just like a person graduating from college. You could graduate, you could get a master's at a certain age if you go continuously. I got my master's almost 20 years after I left undergrad, so the only thing I can tell you to do, be aware of who's applying for the job and also who is on the job, if you can. If you see people walking around in the hallways in a law firm and they all look like they're of a certain age that is out of your age range, then you can use that as possible evidence. I hope I answered your question.
Interesting. Thank you very much. I think that was great. Not to skip over the previous question, we'll just go back to Kati's as well. So the question was about mentioning salary range in an interview. I think there's also a number of resources. You can look on Glassdoor. You can get an idea of what the range is. But none of us want to price ourselves out, especially as women, knowing that we get paid in general less than the men do. So I believe that question would be for Kati, just because she's the one who currently is in the hiring market at the moment. What do you think, and possibly for Lisa as well, who might have some statistics on that, but what do you guys say about salary and women?
Well, I would say that for anyone I hire, I actually have a unique experience on my job because my team didn't exist until I was the first hire. And then we've built up the team, and my team doesn't really do production, and we're more like strategists, but we also don't do marketing. So I actually really fought not in like a mean way, but like fought to make sure that my team was going to be graded accordingly. And so making sure that I set the standard, and half of how I did it, honestly, was by getting myself an external offer that was $110,000 more than I was making. So that really helped level the playing field for my entire team. And as their manager, I always make sure that we are not offending anyone that's coming in, but making sure that they feel seen and heard right off the bat, because we want to make sure that we have fulfilled and happy employees coming into the door that feel valued for their experience. So I would recommend to you always ask around what range. Make sure that you're the one asking the question, not being asked the question, because then you're being put into a position where you have now to potentially navigate disclosing your current salary. Continue to lay back on your experience. When I've been asked like, oh, what range are you looking for? I'm like, I would love to hear more about the scope of work. And as we continue the interview process, get a better sense, because I know that I have X amount of years of experience in DTC, and that, has tremendous value, especially with so many competitors out in the marketplace. Vague still answers, still making sure that they understand that, like, listen, I have been around these tracks and I have been underpaid grossly in a job. I think it was my second job. And I made a commitment to myself that I would never, ever, ever work for somebody who so grossly took advantage of me ever again. So if I ever see a company even trying to offer me below my standard, I already know that I'm not going to succeed there.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of having a ready answer just in your pocket. So they answer the question, you already have a line you're ready to say to handle that and to move it forward. Great. Lisa, did you want to add anything to that about women's salary in the workplace?
Yeah, generally speaking, women make like about 80% of what men make. And where we are in the business cycle affects these things. So in boom times, these high-paying jobs that men typically have makes the difference bigger. Yeah. Generally, in recessions, the jobs that women have in education and health are generally more stable. The men lose possibly the high-paying jobs that are more cyclical, and the gap narrows. But really, so you need to look at the numbers intelligently. But generally speaking, women make less than men do. They're in fields that pay less. And, but this particular recession was different. It affected low-paid workers. They lost their jobs in leisure and hospitality, restaurants, hotels. These are not high-paying jobs. Some low-paying jobs in healthcare because surgeries weren't being conducted, and a lot of support services weren't there for what hospitals do. It's a very different recession this time. So I don't know how the numbers are going to play out, but certainly, even if you look within an occupation, say, for example, I don't know, you look at RN, male RNs make more than female RNs. This is what the data show. So this is a job, you're comparing it, a like job, and still you see that men make a little more than women. And for the specifics, you would have to go to our website. We have all that data, especially on the national level. I wanted to say something optimistic. We're in a cycle where the population is aging and it's retiring. So there's openings. Someone's going to need to fill these jobs. So there's opportunity. And even in the flux of a pandemic, things change and there's opportunity. So you need to position yourself to take advantage of that by doing everything everybody said, knowing your market, positioning yourself well on LinkedIn, doing your research, speaking up if something doesn't go right in the interview in terms of discrimination, and using the resources that we have available to us that we haven't had in the past.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it sounds like we also all just need to have the confidence to go in and say, you may not know this yet, but I'm actually the person you're looking for, and this is why.
One here is for Lisa around what are non-traditional opportunities with a JD degree that you can explore, as well as how do you navigate, and this one's more for the open space, limited work experience and degree from many years ago.
Okay, for the non-traditional opportunities for the JD, go to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, look up lawyers, and look at related occupations. That's where you find some ideas there, okay? And you can look up general categories, just peruse it, because you have a lot of skills as a JD so that you can apply them elsewhere. It did not necessarily, maybe with the job you're looking for, but you could apply those skills elsewhere. But I would look at related occupations. It's a tab in the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is very easy to use. Go in there and use it.
If I may add, because our next event will be more in depth regarding career mobility, please register. I'm sure that question will come up, and you'll be able to ask those questions, and it will be a good place to ask that and get even more answers to it.
I would also say highly encourage people to look at business affairs jobs. They're completely underrated, but super great and across many industries. That's a slight plug-in because we have roles open too. And then one of the last questions here is around what about job references? Some of mine, the employer disappeared or died, and I don't have any phone numbers or email stats of the job application.
Wow. That's rough. But I mean, it's a part of life. I mean, those things, do happen. And I think if you're upfront with the, prospective employer, if they ask and they said, I can't get in touch with so-and-so and so, you just have to, I would think, to be upfront with them and, just let them know. It's hard, because people relocate and, you just lose contact. Now, I don't know if anybody else has any, information on, how could they get around that?
I would say mentors as well. Like if you've acquired those throughout your career mobility journey, like tap into them to speak into your skill sets and maybe some of the transferable skills you have there. I know that I really have never listed my direct manager as as I have when asked, of course, but the people I normally go to are mentors and sponsors of mine that don't just see me for where I am, but where I want and can be. So would encourage you all to look there as well.
And I just wanted to bring up something really quick. I don't know if they still do it now, but informational interviews, where you go to, an employer that you're thinking about working for and have an informational interview. There you can ask the questions about salary. You can ask the questions about, what skills are needed. So then you could ask the employer. So then when you're ready to go back for the interview, you know exactly what to say for that position.
Oh, in the chat, and so thank you all. You're all so knowledgeable. Thank you, ladies, so much for this amazing panel discussion. And again, stay tuned for the rest of the workshops. Well, this is not workshop, but for the workshops that will go more in depth about all the topics that we touched on today. Stewart, you're an amazing host, even when you're in and out. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Center for the Women of New York, thank you.
From all of you, thank you so much that we have the data behind us to be able to rely on. Mm-hmm. We actually have laws in place to protect us, and we have amazing women in the workforce who are ready to be our advocates if we can just get to them. So I love that. This has been an amazing hour. Again, I apologize for any technical difficulties, but so glad that we could all gather together. I hope that every one of you has found this inspirational I hope that you have found it informative and that you'll be able to use some of the links in the chat, but also be able to go and use some of these resources, do the searches and find out information that you can have in your pocket next time you're negotiating salary, talking about a new job, and considering where you're going to be going in the workforce. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Come and join us again. And if you're not already a member, consider joining the Center for the Women of New York. We would love to have you. We'd love to have all of you.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.